The kitchen timer beeped 3 times sharp and insistent, but I barely heard it. I was standing at the sink scrubbing a plate that didn't need washing, the soapy water turning lukewarm between my fingers. My mind was elsewhere on Maddie, my daughter, my heart. The last time I'd seen her was 2 nights ago, tucked into her bed, her dark hair spilling over the pillow like ink. Now she lay in a hospital bed, tubes in her arms, machines beeping in slow mechanical rhythms. And I was here in the kitchen going through the motions of a life that had spun wildly off course. I threw the sponge down, turned off the water, and grabbed my keys. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Kara wasn't home again. She'd left that morning with a breezy excuse about an early meeting and hadn't texted since. I tried not to think about where she might be, or who she might be with. When I got to the hospital, the smell hit me like a punch in the gut. That mix of antiseptic and stale air of machines and quiet desperation. I nodded at the nurse at the front desk and walked the now familiar path to Maddie's room in the ICU. Room 213. The numbers burned into my brain. She looked so small in that bed. 13 years old, and hooked up to more machines than I could count. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her breathing was shallow beneath the oxygen mask. I pulled up the chair beside her and took her hand gently, careful not to disturb the IV lines. Her fingers were cool limp. I ran my thumb over the back of her hand, as if I could will her to wake up. "Hey, kiddo," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "Dad's here." I don't know why I looked down then, why I turned her hand over. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was blind luck, or maybe it was just the kind of miracle a father begs for in the middle of the night. But there it was. A tiny crumpled scrap of paper wedged between her fingers, barely visible under the hospital blanket. I carefully pulled it free, unfolding it like it was a piece of treasure. The handwriting was shaky, scrawled in pencil letters, smudged like they'd been gripped too tightly. "Daddy, help me." The words punched the air out of my lungs. My vision blurred, a rush of heat flooding my chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just a freak fall off a bike on Pine Ridge Road. Maddie had written this, left it for me to find. A message from the edge of unconsciousness, a plea I couldn't ignore. "Jesus! Maddie!" I whispered, clutching the note like it could dissolve if I let go. My brain kicked into overdrive, replaying the last few weeks. The missed classes, the way she'd been withdrawn, the tension in her voice when I asked where she'd been. And Kara always brushing it off, telling me I was overreacting. "She's just a teenager, Tom. Let her be." No, not this time. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, drawing a glance from the nurse at the station. My heart was hammering in my chest, adrenaline flooding my veins. I took out my phone, dialed Josh. "Tom, what's going on?" His voice was groggy, like I'd woken him up. I found something, I said, barely able to keep the panic out of my voice. "Maddie." She left a note. She was asking for help. There was a pause, and then Josh's voice sharpened. "What do you mean, a note? Where are you?" "At the hospital." "Her room. I'll be there in 20. I ended the call and sat back down, my hands shaking as I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my pocket. I looked at Maddie. Really looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the faint bruises on her arms where they'd placed the IVs, the cut on her forehead from the fall. But was it a fall? Or was it something else? I remembered Kara's voice in the kitchen last week, low and tight on the phone. "We can't wait much longer," she'd whispered when she thought I wasn't listening. I'd chalked it up to work stress. Kara always had some high-profile case she was juggling, some client who needed special attention. But now that conversation replayed in my mind with a sinister edge. I took Maddie's hand again, holding it tight like I could keep her anchored to me, to this life. "I'll figure this out, baby," I promised, my voice low, fierce. "I'll find out what happened, and I'll make it right." The machines kept beeping steady and cold, but I barely heard them. All I could hear was my own heartbeat loud in my ears and the echo of those words on the crumpled paper. "Daddy, help me." I would, no matter what it took. By the time Josh showed up, I was pacing the narrow stretch of linoleum outside Maddie's room like a caged animal. The note burned a hole in my pocket, each word seared into my brain. "Daddy, help me." Josh arrived in a faded hoodie and jeans, looking like he'd thrown himself into the truck the second I'd called. His eyes went straight to mine, worry etching lines across his forehead. You okay? He asked, voice low, glancing toward Maddie's door. No, I answered honestly. Not even close. We moved to the waiting area, a sad little corner with sagging chairs and a vending machine that hadn't been stocked in months. I handed him the note. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. Jesus, Tom, he muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. This isn't nothing. You were right to be suspicious. I think Kara had something to do with this. I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Josh's head snapped up. Your wife? You really think... I nodded slowly. I don't want to. God knows I don't want to. But I keep thinking about that night last week. I overheard her on the phone, her voice low urgent. I didn't catch much, but she said something like, we can't wait much longer. And Maddie, she's been so distant skipping school, acting like she's afraid of something. Josh leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you think Kara knew Maddie was listening? That she found out something she wasn't supposed to? That's what I'm afraid of, I admitted. Josh let out a low whistle, glancing around the waiting room like we might be overheard. What's your next move? I need to know who Kara was talking to. And I need to find out where Maddie was going when she skipped class. Josh nodded. Let me see what I can dig up. I know a guy at the county records office. Maybe he can help. Thanks, man. I squeezed his shoulder, grateful in a way I couldn't put into words. That night, I went home alone. The house felt colder than usual, shadows clinging to the corners. Kara wasn't home. Again. I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the wall, the note in my hand, my thoughts spiraling. Around midnight, I heard the garage door rumble open. Kara's car pulled in headlights, sweeping across the living room window like a spotlight. She came in a few minutes later, heels clicking on the hardwood, her perfume wafting ahead of her, something floral and sharp, not the scent she usually wore. Tom, she called, her voice smooth, casual. I didn't answer. I watched her from the shadows, the way she moved, calm, composed, as if she didn't have a care in the world. She froze when she spotted me, eyes widening for a fraction of a second, before she smoothed her expression. You're up late, she said lightly, setting her purse on the counter. Couldn't sleep, I replied, keeping my voice steady. She walked over to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water, unscrewing the cap with a practiced flick. I watched the muscles in her neck tense as she took a sip. Where were you? I asked, letting the question hang heavy in the air. Late meeting, she replied without missing a beat. The Miller case is heating up. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her answer. Kara, I said, my voice low, almost casual. You ever wonder why Maddie's been acting strange? Why she's been skipping school? Her eyes flickered just for a moment, but I saw it. A flash of something, annoyance maybe, or fear. She's a teenager, Tom, Kara said, her tone breezy but her posture too rigid. They all go through phases. Yeah, I murmured. But not all of them end up in a hospital bed fighting for their life. Her lips tightened into a thin line. She grabbed her water bottle and turned toward the stairs. I'm going to bed, she said, voice clipped. You should too. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close, then exhaled slowly, the tension draining from my shoulders only to be replaced by a cold determination. The next morning, I called Maddie's school, pretending to be concerned about her missed classes. The secretary pulled up her file and rattled off the dates: 3 absences in the last 2 weeks, all on Thursdays. What about after school? I asked. Did she go home early? Did she leave campus? The secretary hesitated. Well, actually, we've had some reports from other parents. They said they've seen Maddie riding her bike out past Pine Ridge Road. Alone. Pine Ridge. My gut twisted. That was where they found her, at the bottom of that steep embankment. I thanked the secretary and hung up, my hands shaking. Maddie wasn't just skipping class. She was going somewhere. And someone had wanted to make sure she never came back. I glanced at the note again, my resolve hardening. Daddy, help me. I would. I had to. The next time I walked into Maddie's room, I wasn't just a father desperate for answers. I was a man on a mission. The weight of that note in my pocket had shifted something inside me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was anger. Maddie's monitors beeped steadily in the dim light. Her hair was matted against her forehead, and her skin looked so pale, like the color had been drained from her. I sat beside her, holding her hand, willing her to open her eyes and tell me everything she knew. That's when I noticed Emily. She was standing by the medication station checking the IV bags with a furrowed brow. She was young, early 30s maybe, with dark hair pulled back into a messy bun, and kind eyes that looked sharper than most. "You're here a lot," she said, glancing over her shoulder at me. "I'm not leaving," I replied flatly. She nodded as if she understood more than she let on. Then she hesitated, her fingers still hovering over Maddie's chart. "Something's not adding up," she muttered almost to herself. I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" She looked at me, her eyes narrowing like she was making a decision in real time. Then she lowered her voice. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I've been reviewing Maddie's labs. Her potassium levels, they spiked overnight. That's not normal, especially for a kid her age." My stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" She glanced toward the hallway, making sure no one was listening. "Elevated potassium can cause cardiac arrest. It can happen naturally, but not usually like this. Someone would have to administer it directly." Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. "You're saying someone's trying to kill her?" Emily hesitated, then gave the faintest nod. I felt the world tilt under my feet. "Who has access to her meds?" I asked, my voice tight. "Mostly the attending physician," she said quietly. "Dr. Tran. And the night shift nurse. And family members if they're left alone with the patient. Kara." The pieces started to fit together in my mind, a grotesque puzzle I never wanted to solve. Kara pushing to let Maddie go, Dr. Tran, the ever-so-smooth doctor who kept insisting we talk about quality of life, the unexplained spikes in Maddie's labs, and the late-night visits. I leaned in closer to Emily, my voice low and urgent. "Can you help me? I need proof. Real proof. Can you get me access to the records? The logs. Anything that shows who's been in here?" She hesitated, clearly torn, but then her jaw tightened. "I'll do what I can, but if I get caught, you won't. I promised. I'll make sure of it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my truck outside the hospital, staring at the glow of the ICU windows. Around 11:30 p.m., I saw a figure slipping into the building. Kara. I watched her through the glass as she made her way down the corridor, her posture too deliberate, too calm. She wasn't here for a midnight visit out of love. I followed her inside, staying far enough back to avoid being seen. I pressed my back against the wall outside Maddie's room and peered through the small window in the door. Kara was standing over Maddie, her hand hovering over the IV line, holding something small and metallic. Maybe a syringe? She leaned down, whispering something I couldn't hear. Maddie's face was still, her body motionless, completely unaware of the danger inches from her. My pulse thundered in my ears, my hands clenched into fists, every instinct screaming at me to burst through the door. But I forced myself to wait. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo through the window, catching Kara in the act. That's when Emily appeared behind me, a clipboard in her hands. Her eyes widening as she saw what I was doing. She didn't say a word, just nodded once sharply like we were on the same team. The next morning, Emily slipped a USB drive into my hand. "These are the access logs," she whispered. "Kara's been in Maddie's room 4 times this week outside of visiting hours, and Dr. Tran signed off on every visit." My breath caught. "Thank you," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. She gave me a tight smile. "Be careful. They're not going to stop." I knew she was right. I left the hospital with the USB drive in my pocket, a photo of Kara in my phone, and a storm brewing in my chest. They had tried to take my daughter from me. They weren't going to get a second chance. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun dipped below the Oregon pines, the only light coming from the stove clock blinking 2:17 a.m. The USB drive Emily had given me sat in front of me, small but heavy with meaning. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop and pulled up the logs. Clear as day, Kara's name appeared 4 times in Maddie's file after hours, each time signed off by Dr. Tran. There was no more room for doubt. They weren't just hoping Maddie wouldn't wake up. They were actively trying to make sure she never did. Josh sat across from me, his eyes dark with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "Jesus, Tom," he whispered, running his hands through his hair. "Your wife? She's a goddamn snake." "Yeah," I said quietly, staring at the screen like I could burn a hole through it. and I'm going to make sure she never gets close to Maddie again." Josh leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "So what's the plan?" I stared at him for a long moment, my mind racing. Then the pieces clicked into place. Simple, risky, but necessary. "We give them what they want," I said slowly. Josh's eyes narrowed. "You're not seriously considering we make it look like I'm giving up, that I'm ready to pull the plug?" "Tom, that's insane. It's the only way. Kara won't be able to resist." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. "She'll want to make sure it happens herself. That's when we'll catch her in the act." Josh let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "You're playing with fire." "I don't care." My voice was steel. "This ends. Now." The next morning, I marched into Red Pine General like a man beaten down. Dark circles under my eyes, stubble on my chin, my clothes rumpled and hanging loose. I found Dr. Tran in his office, his pristine white coat a stark contrast to my disheveled appearance. "I'm ready to talk about the end," I said, my voice hoarse. His eyes lit up just a little too quickly. "Of course, Mr. Hanley. It's a difficult decision, but given the circumstances—" "I just need a day," I interrupted, forcing my voice to crack to sound defeated. "Tonight, I want to say goodbye properly." Dr. Tran nodded, his expression sympathetic on the surface, but with a flicker of something colder beneath. I left his office and walked straight to Emily, who was finishing a shift at the nurse's station. "They bought it," I told her under my breath. Her jaw tightened. "Then we're on for tonight." "Yeah." I exhaled slowly. "Let's make sure we catch them red-handed." Emily nodded, her eyes fierce. That afternoon, Josh came by with a small black bag. "Security cameras," he said, pulling out 3 tiny devices no bigger than a quarter. "They'll transmit directly to my laptop. We'll catch everything." We worked quickly, installing the cameras, one above Maddie's bed disguised as a smoke detector, another near the medication station, and a third facing the door. Emily helped us place a small audio recorder inside Maddie's favorite stuffed bear, the one she always slept with when she was little. By the time the night shift rolled in, everything was set. Emily adjusted Maddie's medication schedule so no one would need to come in until morning. Josh parked his truck across the street, laptop opened, the live feed from the cameras blinking on the screen. I sat beside Maddie, holding her hand, whispering the same promise over and over. "I'm not going anywhere, kiddo. We're going to get through this." Around 11:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. Josh's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Tom, she's here." Kara just pulled into the parking lot. My chest constricted. I leaned down, brushing Maddie's hair off her forehead, and whispered, "It's almost over, sweetheart. Just hang on." I slipped out of the room, ducking into the small storage closet across the hall. From the tiny crack in the door, I could see everything: Maddie's bed, the monitors, the bear with the hidden mic. Minutes later, Kara appeared in the doorway, moving with quiet, calculated precision. She was dressed in black, her hair pulled back, her expression sharp and focused. She closed the door softly behind her, glancing around once to make sure no one was watching. Then she pulled a small silver case from her purse and opened it. Inside, a syringe gleamed under the dim light. My stomach twisted into knots, every muscle in my body screaming at me to charge in to stop her. But I forced myself to stay still, to let the cameras do their work. Kara leaned over Maddie, her voice a soft, poisonous whisper. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, baby girl. But you were never supposed to hear what you heard." Her hand hovered over Maddie's IV port, the needle poised. Josh's voice crackled in my ear. "Tom, are you seeing this?" "Yeah," I whispered. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. "Ready when you are." "Not yet," I whispered back, watching Kara's every move. "Let her hang herself. Let her show the world exactly who she is." I counted every breath I took in that dark closet, watching through the crack, as Kara leaned over Maddie, the syringe glinting in her hand like a tiny silver dagger. My heart pounded so loud I was sure it would give me away, but I stayed frozen, waiting for the moment I'd have proof. Kara tapped the syringe, a practiced flick of her fingers, and leaned closer to Maddie's IV line. She whispered again, low and steady like a mother soothing her child. "You were supposed to sleep, baby girl," she murmured. "It's better this way. No more pain, no more fear." The hair on my arm stood on end, rage curling in my gut like a snake ready to strike. Josh's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Tom, we're getting everything. Audio's clean, video's perfect. Don't blow it yet. I forced myself to breathe. Kara's hand moved toward the IV port, her thumb poised on the plunger. My vision tunneled the edges of the world, narrowing until it was just Kara, Maddie, and that needle. Then she spoke again, and this time the words cut like a blade. Your dad was supposed to die first. You know, she whispered, her voice a serpent's hiss. But you ruined everything. You always had to stick your nose where it didn't belong. That was it. I kicked the closet door open so hard it slammed into the wall. Kara. I bellowed, my voice raw, shaking the room. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide, the syringe still in her hand. For a split second, she looked like a trapped animal, wild, panicked, and ready to fight. What the hell are you doing here? She spat, her voice cracking. I stormed into the room, fists clenched, my blood roaring in my ears. You tell me, I roared back. What were you planning to do to our daughter, Kara? Put her down like an old dog. Finish what you and Evan started. Her eyes darted around looking for an escape, but the door behind her swung open and there was Josh, followed by 2 hospital security guards and Detective Vance, badge in hand, her expression cold and focused. Step away from the patient, ma'am. Vance ordered, her voice sharp as a blade. Kara's face twisted into something ugly, hatred, fear, desperation. She dropped the syringe and it clattered onto the floor, spinning in slow, damning circles. This isn't what it looks like, Kara shrieked, backing against the wall. I was checking her IV. Save it for the jury, Vance snapped. She gestured to the guards. Cuff her. As the guards moved in, Kara's gaze locked onto mine, her mask finally slipping. You think you're so smart, Tom? She hissed. You think you've won. I don't think, I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. I know. Kara lunged, but the guards grabbed her, forcing her arms behind her back. She struggled, cursing, her words venomous and wild. You'll regret this, she screamed. You'll see. You're nothing without me. Get her out of here, Vance ordered. They dragged Kara down the hallway, her voice fading but her rage still crackling in the air. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd stood, my body shaking, my breath ragged. Josh stepped up beside me, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Hell of a show, he muttered, shaking his head. I couldn't speak. My eyes drifted to Maddie, my baby girl still lying motionless, a small frown creasing her forehead, as if she'd heard some of it. Emily slipped into the room, her expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. We got it all, she said quietly. Video, audio, everything. Kara's toast. Thank you, I whispered, my voice cracking. She gave me a small smile. I'd say it's the least I could do, but no. This was the right thing. Detective Vance stayed behind, watching me closely. Tom, she said, her tone measured, we still need Evan. This doesn't end here. I nodded, the weight of it all crashing down on me. I'm going to find him, I promised. I'm going to finish this. Vance gave a sharp nod, then left the room, leaving me alone with Maddie. I sat beside her, taking her hand in both of mine. My voice was a whisper, barely audible over the steady beep of the monitors. It's almost over, kiddo. I promise. Her fingers twitched, just a flicker, but it was enough to send a fresh wave of tears down my face. I squeezed her hand gently, pressing my forehead to the back of it, breathing in the faint scent of her skin. You hold on, baby girl, I whispered, a tear slipping down onto the sheets. Your dad's got you. No one's going to hurt you ever again. And I meant it. With every fiber of my being, I meant it. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I left the hospital, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my mind sharp and cold. The moment I stepped into the night air, I called Josh. His truck engine rumbled on the other end before he picked up. Tell me you've got something, I said without even saying hello. Josh's voice was tight, focused. I do. Evan's apartment, Red Pines Lofts, top floor corner unit. Just saw him pull in 10 minutes ago. My grip tightened on the phone. Stay on him, I ordered. Don't let him out of your sight. Copy that. I hung up, climbed into my truck, and tore out of the parking lot like my tires were on fire. Evan Griggs. The smug bastard who thought he could manipulate my life, take my family, and walk away clean. I pictured his face, the slicked back hair, the designer watch, the arrogant smirk that said he always had the upper hand. Not tonight. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a dark alley behind the Red Pines Lofts. Josh was parked across the street in his truck, eyes locked on the building. He gave me a quick nod when I approached. "Lights went on about 5 minutes ago," he said quietly. "He's up there pacing." I glanced up, spotting a faint glow in the top corner window. My chest clenched. "Let's move." We crept up the fire escape, staying low, hearts pounding in sync. At the top, I crouched near Evan's door, listening. Faint shuffling, the click of a laptop keyboard, papers rustling. Josh's voice in my ear was a whisper. "He's deleting files." I clenched my fists. Not this time. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. An old contact in hospital security, a guy named Trent. When he answered, groggy and confused, I didn't waste time. "Trent, it's Tom Hanley. I need access logs from the hospital system, Evan Griggs's login history. Now." A pause. "Then give me 5. While I waited, I motioned for Josh to stay back. I wasn't ready to burst in just yet. I wanted Evan panicked, sloppy. Through the door, I could hear him muttering, cursing under his breath. "Where is it? Where is it? Come on, come on!" I imagined him rifling through folders, scrambling to cover his tracks, that smug composure crumbling. My phone buzzed. A text from Trent. "Got it. Evan accessed Maddie's records 8 times in the past month, mostly after hours. Forwarding logs now." I grinned grimly, saving the files. This was it. The nail in the coffin. I motioned to Josh. "Let's end this." He gave me a sharp nod, pulling out his phone to record. I knocked sharp and loud. Evan's voice cracked. "Who is it, Tom Hanley?" My voice was calm, steady, like I wasn't about to tear his life apart. There was a pause, then the sound of locks clicking frantically. Evan swung the door open, a fake smile plastered across his face. "Tom." What a surprise. "Listen, I'm sorry about everything. I didn't mean for any of this." I stepped inside, crowding his space, my voice low and cold. "Cut the crap, Evan. I know everything. The insurance policies, the records you deleted, the bribes. You and Kara plotted to kill me for the payout, and when Maddie overheard, you tried to take her out too." His face paled, his hands trembling slightly. "You can't prove that," he stammered. "You don't have anything." Josh lifted his phone, the screen glowing. "Oh, we have everything." I cut in, my voice sharp. "The audio from Kara trying to kill Maddie, the logs of you accessing her records, the email chains, Evan. The whole damn web you thought you could hide." Evan's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "You don't understand," he whispered, looking between me and Josh like a trapped animal. "She said it would be easy, just a clean break. She promised we'd start over in Mexico." "Mexico?" Josh repeated, shaking his head. "You two really thought this was a soap opera, huh?" Evan's eyes darted to his laptop, where a file was still loading. I grabbed it, flipping the screen toward me. A draft transfer form to an offshore account, property records for a beachfront villa in Tulum. The whole escape plan laid out like a blueprint for betrayal. "You're done, Evan," I said quietly. "It's over." Before he could move, Detective Vance burst in, gun-drawn badge gleaming under the dim lights. "Evan Griggs, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud." Evan barely managed to stammer, "I didn't," before the cuffs clicked around his wrists. Josh and I watched as they led him out, his face a mixture of shame and fear. I turned to Josh, my heart still racing, my fists slowly unclenching. "One down," I said. Josh nodded grimly. "Now we take them all down." The courthouse smelled like old wood and polished shoes, the kind of place where you felt small even before the judge's gavel came down. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded tightly in front of me, Maddie's name written on the manila folder in bold black letters. Her voice, small and shaking, echoed in my memory. "Daddy, help me." I glanced across the aisle at Kara. She sat in a navy blue blazer, her hair pulled back tight, no sign of the woman I'd once loved. Her expression was carefully composed, innocent concern, the picture of a mother wronged by circumstance. But I saw through it now. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as the bailiff called the case. Judge Howard Driggs presided, a man whose name had popped up far too often in Kara's emails for me to trust him. His face was thin, sharp-featured, and when he looked down at Kara, his expression softened, like he'd just run into an old friend at the country club. "Mrs. Hanley," he began, "you're here today facing serious allegations. Attempted murder of your daughter, conspiracy to commit murder against your husband, insurance fraud." Quite the list. Kara sat up straighter, her voice smooth and polished. Your Honor, these allegations are outrageous. I'm a devoted mother, a respected member of this community. My husband is unwell. He's been under tremendous stress. I clenched my fist under the table, the rage bubbling in my chest. Your Honor, my attorney interjected, we have clear evidence contradicting Mrs. Hanley's claims. The prosecution clicked a button, and a video filled the screens on either side of the room. Kara standing over Maddie's hospital bed, syringe in hand, her voice a chilling whisper. Your dad was supposed to die first, you know. But you ruined everything. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kara's mask shattered for a brief second, her eyes flashing with pure, unfiltered rage, before she smoothed her face back into calm denial. That's taken out of context, she said quickly, her voice tight, eyes darting toward Judge Driggs. But the damage was done. Then came the emails, dozens of them, between Kara and Evan, detailing the life insurance payouts, the villa in Mexico, the offshore accounts. Kara's lawyer scrambled to object, but the judge waved him off, his face a shade paler than before. Finally, the moment that broke whatever flimsy defense Kara had left Maddie's testimony. She sat in her wheelchair, pale but steady, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard them, she said, her eyes locked on the jury. Mom and Evan, they were talking about killing my dad. They said he was a problem. And I was too. Kara's face crumpled. Her hands trembled in her lap, her composure cracking like thin ice. Maddie, sweetheart, you misunderstood, she started, but the words fell flat, her voice desperate now, pleading. Detective Vance stepped forward with the logs from the hospital, Evan's unauthorized access to Maddie's records, the suspicious lab results, the altered dosages. When the prosecution rested, the silence in the room was deafening. Kara's lawyer tried. God, did he try. He painted her as a loving mother, a victim of circumstance, a woman trapped in a loveless marriage manipulated by Evan. But it didn't matter. The jury didn't buy it. Neither did I. When the verdict was read, I barely breathed. Guilty. On all counts. Kara collapsed into her chair, sobbing now, the image of the perfect wife and mother shattering completely. As the bailiff cuffed her, she turned to me, her eyes wild, feral. You think you've won, Tom? You think this makes you a hero? You're nothing without me. Nothing. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, steady and unblinking, and said the words that had been burning in my chest since the day I found Maddie's note. No, Kara. I'm a father, and that means I protect my daughter no matter what. She struggled as they led her away, her voice rising into a shriek, a sound that would haunt me for years. The courtroom emptied slowly, the whispers and glances lingering in the air like smoke. Maddie gripped my hand tightly as we left the room, her fingers small and warm against mine. You did it, Dad, she whispered. I squeezed her hand, fighting the sting in my eyes. No, kiddo. We did. Outside, the Oregon sky stretched wide and blue above us, a light breeze cutting through the tension in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew it wasn't over. Not completely. Because there were still pieces of this nightmare I needed to finish. And I was ready. It had been 6 weeks since the trial ended. 6 weeks since I sat in that courtroom and watched the woman I once trusted with my life get led away in cuffs. 6 weeks since Maddie had whispered those words to me. You did it, Dad. But I didn't feel like a hero. Not really. The nightmares still came, some nights worse than others. Visions of Kara standing over Maddie's hospital bed, that syringe glinting under the dim light. Or Evan's smug face staring me down, daring me to stop him. Even now, as I sat on the porch of our small rental house on the edge of Red Pine, I could feel the weight of it all pressing on my chest. But then I heard its soft footsteps on the porch, the quiet shuffle of sneakers. I looked up, and there she was, Maddie. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her cheeks still a little pale, but her eyes bright. She was holding a sketch pad, her fingers smudged with charcoal. Hey, kiddo, I said, managing a small smile. She grinned, that lopsided smile that looked so much like her mother's, but softer, gentler, without the cold calculation. I finished it, she said, holding up the sketch pad like a prize. I took it carefully, my hands trembling a little as I turned it toward the fading sunlight. The drawing was of a tall pine tree, strong and solid, its roots twisting deep into the earth. And beneath it, 2 figures, me and Maddie, standing side by side, holding hands. My throat tightened, and I had to blink a few times before I could speak. It's beautiful, sweetheart. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I wanted to draw us like we are now, not like before. Before, everything. I reached over and pulled her into a hug, careful not to squeeze too tight. You're the bravest kid I know, Maddie, I whispered into her hair. We're going to be okay. I promise. She didn't answer, but I felt her nod against my chest. Later that night, as Maddie slept in her room, finally peacefully without machines or monitors, Josh stopped by. He sat on the porch steps, cracking open a beer, and handed me one. You did good, man, he said, his voice low. Real good. I shook my head, staring out at the darkened street. I almost lost her, Josh. I almost... But you didn't, he cut in. You fought like hell, and you won. That's more than most can say. I looked at him, the weight of it all hitting me like a brick wall. Do you ever think it's over? I mean, really over. Josh took a sip of his beer, thinking for a moment. Some things, they never really leave you, he admitted. But you learn to carry it, and you make damn sure it doesn't carry you. I let that sink in for a while, the night air cool against my skin. The next morning, I took Maddie down to the beach. The Oregon coast stretched out in front of us, endless and wild. The waves crashed against the shore, the salty breeze tugging at our hair. She ran ahead, her arms outstretched like she was flying, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I heard her laugh, really laugh. The sound of it was like a salve on an open wound, healing something deep inside me. I sat on the sand, watching her, letting the warmth of the sun seep into my bones. My phone buzzed. A message from Detective Vance Evan accepted a plea deal. 25 years, no parole. Kara's sentence upheld life without parole. It's over, Tom. For good this time. I stared at the message, the words blurring for a second. Then I exhaled long and slow, the tension easing from my shoulders. It was over. Maddie ran back to me, breathless, her cheeks flushed with color. Dad, can we build a sandcastle? She asked, her eyes sparkling. I smiled, really smiled, and nodded. Yeah, kiddo. Let's build something together. We spent the rest of the afternoon stacking sand-shaping towers and walls, our hands messy and wet, the ocean roaring in the background. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have. But it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the beach, I looked at Maddie and realized this wasn't just the end of a nightmare. It was the beginning of something new. Something better. Just the two of us. And that was more than enough.